Hey, this is Michael with growthhop.com, and I'm here with you today to do another tutorial on Google Sheets. This tutorial is one that I've been excited about because this function in particular is probably one that I use the absolute most. I'm always creating reports and Google Sheet dashboards of sorts, and the SUMIFS function within Google Sheets is very powerful and helpful at summarizing data very quickly and aggregating data based on different parameters. So let's just jump into it. I've got three examples from simple to a little bit more complex, and I've even got a little bonus down here in example 3 that is outside the scope of SUMIFS, but I think you will be appreciative of it. Okay, so with example number 1, this is very simple. I just want to aggregate the number of sales that was performed by each salesman total. And this time frame, I think, is just March, so it'd be like the first quarter of the year kind of example. So I'm going to do SUMIFS. Now, SUMIF is just if you're going to do one criteria. But I rarely ever am summing on only one criteria, so you can do either or. You can do SUMIF since we're only doing one, or you can do SUMIFS and only do one criteria. It really doesn't matter, but for simplicity, I'll just do SUMIFS. So the sum range that's kind of how you start. You need to select the range that you want to summarize. So I want to summarize the sales, and I've showed this before. You can hold Shift and select your range, or you could hold Shift and Command at the same time and do the arrow down, and that'll drop to the bottom of your table. Or you could do arrow down again, and that'll drop down to the bottom of the spreadsheet. However, for me, because I do this all the time, those two usually don't work because I'm updating data tables all the time. So the number of rows is always changing and so forth. So the way to get around that, to make sure that your formula never gets like out-surpassed by the number of rows you have, just do colon and the letter of the column you're in, and that'll select the entire column no matter how many rows are there. So if you add 10,000 more rows after you create this formula, it's not going to change anything with this formula. It'll always go to the bottom, whether you're at 1,000 rows or 10,000 rows or more. Then you're going to do the function F4, which is locking it to that range of the column I starting in row 6. And I can show you an example here in a second of why that's important. But let's do comma and start to select the first criteria range. So in this case, since our criteria is the salesman, we need to go over here and select basically the same thing that we did with sales, except in this case we're doing the salesman. So I'm going to do colon H. And for the SUMIFS, you want these two values to be the same in terms of how far down you're selecting, or else you're going to get an error. I could show you that actually by doing this. So if I just to give an example here, let's say I only selected this, do function F4, go to Tom. I know I'm moving fast, but that's going to be an error, because the reason you're getting a value issue is because the arrays or the ranges that you selected are different. So I'm going to go back in here and correct that and go back to this, do colon H, hit function F4 to lock it in the range. And I'm going to go to comma and over 1 to Tom. And then I'm going to do function F4 3 times. So that way I'm locking it in the column. The letter sign, or the letter symbol rather, is just a way to let your formula know where it should be holding or locking. For that way when you drag your formulas. Because a lot of times when you write a formula, if you're good and you're thinking ahead, you should only have to write your formula once, and then you should just be able to paste that formula in the rest of your table or view or report that you're trying to create. So I'm going to close that, and I'm going to copy it and paste it, and you can see that here it moved down to Kyle because I locked it in the column. Now, that's basically what you want to do for this. I'm going to format it a little bit nicer. I'm going to go to number, so that way it's more easily readable. Okay, so let's do another example where we have basically two criterias. So I'm going to copy and paste this down here, and you can see that I'm in the same sales column, same salesman column, and I just need to add another criteria. So I'm going to move my cursor into the formula. I'm going to do comma, and now I'm going to move over to the month. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did earlier. I'm going to do colon J to lock it, function F4 to lock the range. Now this is different because we're not going over like we were before, we're going up. So when I do function F4 here, I don't want to lock it to that 1 month of January, because if I hold it here and don't do anything else, wherever I drag that formula, it's going to be stuck on January. But if I hit it again, I'm locking it to the row 11, so that when I drag my formula in this part of the function, it's going to only lock on this row. It won't move down, is what I mean. So I'll show you that in an example here. So if I hit enter, it should summarize it for me, where it's showing Tom's sales in the month of January. And if I copy and move over to February, same thing. It's going to show Tom sales in February. But now here's an interesting thing. If I copy and paste it here, you notice that it didn't move down, and that's because I locked the reference to the row, and then over here I locked the reference to the column. Like I said, you should only have to write your formula once, and then you should only have to write your formula once, and then you can copy and paste that to your entire report or view you're trying to create and hit paste, and now you have all the data summarized exactly how you want it. So I promised that I had in my third example a little bonus, because right now it kind of looks the same. So I want to show you, let's say you're creating this report and your leader says, well, it's interesting to have sales, but I also want to have a view where I can drop down and see how they're selling products. And for this example, I'm only doing 2 different products, so it's pretty simple. But let's say you wanted them to be able to select between product A and product B sales. So if I right-click and go to data validation, this is how I create a drop-down right here. So I want to do a list from range. You could do a list of items where I could just do A and B, and it would create a drop-down like that. And that would be fine because it's really simple. But let's say you had like 1,000 products and you don't have time to write in 1,000 product names. If I go back in here, right-click, scroll down to data validation, I'm going to do a list from a range. And then if you click this select data range, and if I go like this, let's do like that, then you might think to yourself, well, it's going to pull in a bunch of duplicates. Well, the beauty of Google Sheets data validation is when you select like a list like this or a range that has duplicates, it's going to dedupe them for you. So it's going to show drop-down list and cell. You could also have, like, if someone wanted to enter something in, you can reject the input. I'll show you what that means in a second. So let's do save. So you can see it deduped it for you. And your boss, who doesn't maybe know that this is only A and B, he can't type in C. It's going to reject that. Okay, so anyway, so there's your little data validation drop-down thing. But let me show you how to summarize that data based on that drop-down. I'm going to paste. And you can see that it's stuck. The formula is stuck up here in row 11. I'm just going to move that down to row 18. So that way I'm working in the right space, or my formula is in the right space and so forth. So I'm going to move into the formula. I'm going to do comma, and I'm going to scroll up to this box. And now remember, before we did a direct reference, we did function F4, we did it in the column, we did it in the row, but in this case, you want it to lock right here, so you just do function F4 once. And that way, wherever you drag your formula, it's going to stick right there. Do paste. And you can see that I didn't write my formula properly. That's why it gave me an error. First thing you need to do is select your criteria range. Sorry about that. Do :K, lock it, comma, go back here, and like I said, do function F4 once. Close your parenthesis, and now it should work. Now you can copy and paste. You can also just drag it down if you prefer, like this. It'll do the same thing. Copying and pasting will do the same thing. So that is your example on SUMIFS with a few different criterias. You got a data validation example with dropdowns. If you have any questions about your SUMIF formula, or you want me to look at it, to rewrite it for you, I love doing this kind of thing. So shoot me an email or comment on this post with your issue, and I'd be happy to help you figure out your formula error that you're having.